Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Tuesday. Woo! I don't know. It's Tuesday, a party day. Tuesday, October 1st, 2024. We're into a new month. We can, party for a new month, I guess. Halloween, pumpkin spice, Jewish holidays. I mean, that's not really a big woo thing, But okay. It's there. It's happening. Good reminder. Thursday, probably off the air. Probably. I say probably, but yeah, off the air. The only question is whether or not I'll be able to get something pre-recorded and new up there to keep you company. But maybe you too will be busy on Thursday morning with any number of things. Let's see. So many things happening today. That's the way news goes. The history of the world replete with events happening every day. In fact, this morning, I guess, I got the 1 day late reminder from the 4 years ago today Blue Sky feed. So 4 years ago yesterday, I guess. I just missed it. Trump and Biden meet in Cleveland for a Fox News debate. Trump mocks Biden for frequently wearing a mask. He does not reveal, however, that he and his wife had tested positive for COVID 3 days before the debate, where his wife and children all removed their masks, of course, contrary to venue rules. So, ignoring the protocols, even as he knew that he was in fact infected with the virus. This, many people consider to be Trump's first assassination attempt, not Butler, Pennsylvania, but this one, only he was the perpetrator in this one. Figured he'd try and give Joe Biden COVID and kill him before the election. Why he wasn't worried about himself, I don't know, but that's because he was I guess it's because he was a denialist. Anyway, within days, and this was the week, like 4 years ago today and this week, it was kind of touch and go for a while. It wasn't yet at this point in the week, but on the 3rd, which I guess is Thursday, I'll be out celebrating the event, of course. On Thursday would be the anniversary of his essentially giving up to the advice of doctors and advisors, many of whom themselves also had COVID at the time. I saw a graphic about it. I mean, wow, what could have been? Kellyanne Conway had COVID. Hope Hicks had COVID. And I think, didn't we already know? Also, was that the whole episode where Kris Christie got COVID and Rudy Giuliani got COVID? Mike Lee got COVID, and Tom Tillis somehow got COVID too. I think he was somehow in the inner circle there. There was a whole graphic on it. I don't know, maybe I didn't even close it yet. I'll go and take a look. But, okay, most people recovered, and so did Trump, unfortunately. Yeah, Bill Stapien, Mike Lee, Tom Tillis, John Jenkins, the president of Notre Dame, also. Ronna McDaniel, Melania. Wow, what a COVID cluster that was, according to the BBC, reporting back on October 3rd of 2020. So anyway, just a reminder that by the end of the week, Trump was in pretty bad shape. And the whole time, of course, the doctors denied that he was. I'm doing pretty well, I think, and denying that he was on supplemental oxygen. But apparently he was pretty close to being put on a ventilator. And you all remember him. Listen to that, huh? You all remember him. I am Virginian, I guess. I am permitted to say that. But you all remember him arriving back at the White House and gasping for air, dramatically removing the mask, trying to get a shot of himself as the returning hero. But he was kind of barely able to make it up those steps and was really gasping. So he was in some serious trouble 4 years ago this week. And maybe you want to remember it that way. I certainly remember it as the failure of the trolley problem by the doctors. But this was a good reminder this week that, that this was 4 years ago today. They met for this debate. And within the week, Donald Trump would be begging government healthcare workers, socialists that they are, begging government healthcare workers to save his life. Isn't that interesting? On the brink of death. So, by the way, Trump is better off today than he was 4 years ago. He was almost dead at Walter Reed Army Medical Center. Well, now I guess it's all branches now. So they used to call it the Army Medical Center, and I guess it's Walter Reed. Yeah, who knows what they call it anymore? A military medical hospital. But anyway, he was almost dead there, but now he's fine. I'm, I guess, in that sense, worse off now than I was 4 years ago. But in every other sense, I'm doing pretty well, I think. Versus 4 years ago, there's toilet paper to be had. Families can buy more than one package of meat at a time at the supermarket. You know. Things have improved. Anyway, so that's what's making the rounds this morning, and I thought I'd share it with you. What else have we got to share with you today? There's lots. You know, yesterday we didn't get to this. It was a busy day catching up with the weekend with Greg, but you almost certainly all have seen by now yesterday's New York Times editorial board endorsement at long last, finally, not that has changed their coverage any, of Kamala Harris. And it's not supposed to change your coverage, but since their coverage has been so notoriously disastrous, it might have been wise, at some point to take the advice of the editorial board. And yeah, I'm afraid you're going to have to color your opinion, color your coverage a little bit, rather than covering and sane washing everything that Trump does. Why not just simply point out that he's horrible and a serious danger to the country, like your editorial board says? We're the editors in all of this. Well, here's the product of the editorial board. If you haven't seen it, or if you hate the New York Times and refuse to read it, something like that, this is one of those few instances in which you'll probably want to hear the text. And it puts it pretty bluntly. It is hard to imagine a candidate more unworthy to serve as president of the United States than Donald Trump. He has proved himself morally unfit for an office that asks its occupant to put the good of the nation above self-interest. He has proved himself temperamentally unfit for that role that requires the very qualities: wisdom, honesty, empathy, courage, restraint, humility, discipline that he most lacks. Those disqualifying characteristics are compounded by everything else that limits his ability to fulfill the duties of the president: his many criminal charges, convictions, we can say it now, his advancing age, his fundamental lack of interest in policy. And his increasingly bizarre cast of associates. Either one of those last two should be disqualifying all by itself. But honestly, he should never have won a single primary. People should have laughed him off the ballot in the primaries, his lack of interest in policy. What? This job? Are you kidding? Why? Why do you want it? Get away. This unequivocal, dispiriting truth, Donald Trump is not fit to be president, should be enough for any voter who cares about the health of our country and the stability of our democracy to deny him re-election. For this reason, regardless of any political disagreements voters might have with her, Kamala Harris is the only patriotic choice for president. That is really something, don't you think? Most presidential elections are, at their core, about two different visions of America that emerge from competing policies and principles. This one is about something more foundational. It is about whether we invite into the highest office in the land a man who has revealed unmistakably that he will degrade the values, defy the norms, and dismantle the institutions that have made our country strong. As a dedicated public servant who has demonstrated care, competence, and an unwavering commitment to the Constitution, Ms. Harris stands alone in this race. She may not be the perfect candidate for every voter, especially those who are frustrated and angry about our government's failures to fix what's broken. From our immigration system, to public schools, to housing costs, to gun violence. Yet we urge Americans to contrast Ms. Harris's record with her opponents. Ms. Harris is more than a necessary alternative. There is also an optimistic case for elevating her, one that is rooted in her policies and borne out by her experience as vice president, a senator, and a state attorney general. Over the past 10 weeks, Ms. Harris has offered a shared future for all citizens, beyond hate and division. She has begun to describe a set of thoughtful plans to help American families. Where are the plans? While character is enormously important, in this election preeminently so, policies matter Many Americans remain deeply concerned about their prospects and their children's in an unstable and unforgiving world. For them, Ms. Harris is clearly the better choice. She is committed to using the power of her office to help Americans better afford the things they need, to make it easier to own a home, to support small businesses and help workers. Mr. Trump's economic priorities are more tax cuts, which would benefit mostly the wealthy, and more tariffs, which are actually tax increases, which will make prices even more unmanageable for the poor and middle class. Beyond the economy, Ms. Harris promises to continue working to expand access to health care and reduce its cost, like free remdesivir and Regeneron if you are stricken with COVID, before anybody could have any access to it whatsoever. Free. Well, we say free. Free healthcare, though, for Mr. Billionaire. Got the best healthcare in the world and passed the bill to you, by the way. It's not free. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Taxpayers paid all of that. And you, as a taxpayer, when you needed it, sorry, no, you're going to have to FaceTime your death to your family. Nothing we can do for you. Anyway. Beyond the economy, Ms. Harris promises to continue working on expanding access to health care and reduce its cost. She has a long record of fighting to protect women's health and reproductive freedom. Mr. Trump spent years trying to dismantle the Affordable Care Act and boasts of picking the Supreme Court justices who ended the constitutional right to an abortion. Yes, all true. Throw in the COVID thing there, by the way. Dismantle the Affordable Care Act while forcing the top military doctors in the country to save his life, begging them to save his life when he ignored all their advice. And by the way, nobody didn't ask, or at least the doctors didn't pump him full of hydroxychloroquine. They didn't say, go home, drink your fish tank, take your horse's medicine, you'll be fine. Anyway, globally, Ms. Harris would work to maintain and strengthen the alliances with like-minded nations that have long advanced American interests abroad and maintained the nation's security. Mr. Trump, who has long praised autocrats like Vladimir Putin, Viktor Orban, and Kim Jong-un, and saluted their generals, has threatened to blow these democratic alliances apart. I mean, it couldn't be more obvious, but okay. Ms. Harris recognizes the need for global solutions to the global problem of climate change and would continue President Biden's major investments in the industries and technologies necessary to achieve that goal. Mr. Trump rejects the accepted science, except when it comes to COVID, and his contempt for low-carbon energy solutions is matched only by his trollish fealty to fossil fuels. As for our immigration, a huge and largely unsolved issue, the former president continues to demonize and dehumanize immigrants, while Ms. Harris at least offers hope for a compromise, long denied by Congress, to secure the borders and return the nation to a sane immigration system. Many voters have said this, that they want more details about the vice president's plans, as well as more unscripted encounters in which she explains her vision and policies. They are right to ask. Well, I mean, if they haven't seen it, it might be their own fault. Could be the New York Times' fault, possibly. But okay, they're right to ask, but it's there. But, of course, the reason you don't have them is they end up getting reported very negatively, and they're just trying to bang home a message here in the face of one of the dumbest but still somehow remarkably effective message machines there is on the other side. Anyway, given the stakes of this election, Ms. Harris may think that she is running a campaign designed to minimize the risks of an unforced error. Answering journalists' questions and offering greater policy detail could court controversy, after all, under the belief that being the only viable alternative to Mr. Trump may be enough to bring her to victory. That strategy may ultimately prove winning, but it's a disservice to the American people and to our own record. But, what can you do? You're trying to save democracy. It's kind of a big deal. And leaving the public with a sense that she's being shielded from tough questions, as Mr. Biden has been, he had to get a shot in, could backfire by undermining her core argument that a capable new generation stands ready to take the reins of power. Yeah, not really. But Ms. Harris is not wrong, however, on the clear dangers of returning Mr. Trump to office. He has promised to be a different kind of president this time. Not getting better, but getting worse. In fact, one who is unrestrained by checks on power built into the American political system. His pledge to be a dictator on day one might have indeed been a joke, but his undisguised fondness for dictatorships and the strong men who run them is anything but. There's more. Most notably, he systematically undermined public confidence in the result of the 2020 election and then attempted to overturn it, an effort that culminated in an insurrection at the Capitol to obstruct the peaceful transfer of power and resulted in him and some of his most prominent supporters being charged with crimes. He has not committed to honoring the result of this election and continues to insist, as he did at the debate with Ms. Harris on September 10th, that he won in 2020. He has apparently made a willingness to support his lies a litmus test for those in his orbit, starting with JD Vance, who would be his vice president. His disdain for the rule of law goes beyond his efforts to obtain power. It is also central to how he plans to use it. Mr. Trump and his supporters have described a 2025 agenda that would give him the power to carry out the most extreme of his promises and threats. He vows, for instance, to turn the federal bureaucracy and even the Justice Department into weapons of his will to hurt his political enemies. In at least 10 instances during his presidency, he did exactly that, pressuring federal agencies and prosecutors to punish people he felt had wronged him with little or no legal basis for prosecution. I imagine I have got this article set aside somewhere. I think it's a sidebar to an article that's actually in Pocket, but let's march on through the editorial. Some of the people Mr. Trump appointed in his last term saved America from his most dangerous impulses. They refused to break laws on his behalf and spoke up when he put his own interests above his country's. As a result, the former president intends, if reelected, to surround himself with people who are unwilling to defy his demands. Today's version of Mr. Trump, the twice impeached version that faces a barrage of criminal charges, may prove to be the restrained version. Unless American voters stand up to him, Mr. Trump will have the power to do profound and lasting harm to our democracy. That is not simply an opinion of Mr. Trump's character by his critics. It is a judgment of his presidency from those who know it best. And they can claim to know it best, right? The very people he appointed to serve in the most important positions in the White House. Those are the ones they're talking about. I guess it would sound arrogant for them to say they know him best, but Maggie Haberman has a pretty good handle on him. I think she, hasn't helped us deal with him in any way, and kind of manipulated that understanding in ways that we don't appreciate, but that understanding is there, I think. Anyway, they mean the people who were close to him in the White House. Right? It's a judgment of his presidency from those who know it best. Very people he appointed to serve him in the most important position of his White House. It is telling among those who fear a second Trump presidency are people who worked for him and saw him at close range. Mike Pence, Trump's vice president. Remember when he had a different vice president? You ever wonder why he has a different guy now? Has repudiated him. No other vice president in modern history has done this. I believe that anyone who puts themselves over the Constitution should never be president of the United States, Mr. Pence has said, and anyone who asks someone else to put them over the Constitution should never be president of the United States again. Mr. Trump's attorney general has raised similar concerns about his fundamental unfitness, and his chief of staff, and his defense secretary, and his national security advisors, except for the one who was an international spy and he pardoned for it, and his education secretary, and on, a record of denunciation without precedent in the nation's long history. That is not to say Mr. Trump did not add to the public conversation. In particular, he broke decades of Washington consensus. This is an attempt to rehabilitate some part of him, I guess. Broke decades of Washington consensus and led both parties to wrestle with the downsides of globalization, unrestrained trade, and China's rise. His criminal justice reform efforts were well placed. His focus on COVID vaccine development paid off. And his decision to use an emergency public health measure to turn away migrants at the border was the right call at the start of the pandemic. Yet even when the former president's overall aim may have had merit, his operational incompetence, his mercurial temperament, and his outright recklessness often led to bad outcomes. Mr. Trump's tariffs cost Americans billions of dollars. His attacks on China have ratcheted up military tensions with America's strongest rival and a nuclear superpower. His handling of the COVID crisis contributed to historic declines in confidence in public health and to the loss of many lives and jobs and near destruction of the economy. miraculous that we were able to turn it around. But that's what Democrats do. They come in and reverse Republican economic disaster. That's been the case for 30, 40 years now. His overreach on immigration policies, such as his executive order on family separation, was widely denounced as inhumane and often ineffective. And don't forget the Muslim ban. They did, I think. And those were his wins. His tax plan added $2 trillion to the national debt. How did that happen? His promised extension of them would add $5.8 trillion over the next decade. His withdrawal from the Iran nuclear deal destabilized the Middle East. And Israel is in a war with Iran's proxies on every front as a result, we might add. Might they have been destined for that war anyway? Sure. His support for anti-democratic strongmen like Mr. Putin emboldened human rights abusers all over the world. He instigated the longest government shutdown ever. His sympathetic comments toward the Proud Boys expanded the influence of domestic right-wing terrorist groups. In the years since he left office, Mr. Trump has been convicted on felony charges of falsifying business records, found liable in civil court for sexual abuse, and faces 2, possibly 3, other criminal cases. He has continued to stoke chaos and encourage violence and lawlessness wherever it suits his political aims, most recently promoting vicious lies against Haitian immigrants. He recognizes that ordinary people, voters, jurors, journalists, election officials, and law enforcement officers, and many others who are willing to do their duty as citizens and public servants, have the power to hold him to account. So he has spent the last 3.5 years trying to undermine them and sow distrust in anyone or any institution that might stand in his way. Most dangerous for American democracy, Mr. Trump has transformed the Republican Party, an institution that once prided itself on principle and honored its obligations to the law and the Constitution, and turned it into little more than an instrument of his quest to regain power. The Republicans who support Ms. Harris recognize that this election is about something more fundamental than narrow partisan interest. It's about principles that go beyond party. In 2020, this board made the strongest case it could against the re-election of Mr. Trump. 4 years later, many Americans have put his excesses out of their minds, just as Donald Trump himself is out of his mind. We urge them and those who may look back at that period with nostalgia or feel that their lives are not much better now than they were 3 years ago to recognize that his first term was a warning and that a second term Trump would be much more damaging and divisive than the first. Kamala Harris is the only choice. Sort of interesting. I wanted to open this up to. We never did read through this mega piece in the New York Times about Donald Trump's first term is a warning, but and it looks to be pretty long. But I think the video compilation that accompanies the piece, if you're able to see it, is pretty convincing all by itself. Just a few video clips in a loop here that basically tell you what the warning was about. All right. Well, we have a couple of other things to share with you. Speaking of endorsements and anti-endorsements, let's see. We're pushing up against the break, though. Perhaps I'll save this one for after the break and take a moment. Oh, I forgot to look in on the social media platforms and see whether any of our morning warnings, I guess, as you could put it, of our live stream status have been posted that I might repost, depending on which platform you're talking about. But I guess not. But by the way, everyone finds this reminder that Donald Trump almost died from his COVID and begged government healthcare workers to save his life quite popular. I guess this is really seems to have struck a chord on social media. Anyway, I was going to say that speaking of, I guess, healthcare concerns and end-of-life concerns, I suppose, I just wanted to note there have been a couple of celebrity passings that we have neglected to note that I thought we could perhaps catch up on. I worried that our failure to acknowledge them was accelerating the rate of celebrity death, and it started to pick up. So we'll acknowledge. I think we left off by acknowledging Maggie Smith's death earlier, but yesterday we should have taken a moment to note the passing of Kris Kristofferson, great musician and actor and all sorts of other things. He did a number. I don't know whether Donald Trump would have any praise for him or not, but a tremendous figure and a huge number of really interesting stories. He's a really interesting figure just in general. I mean, somebody I probably underappreciated during his lifetime, but always there as a celebrity, and reading some of these stories about him, some of which I've seen before, it's been pretty interesting. So a lot of people probably very moved by that loss. Also, I guess since yesterday's show, we got word of basketball standout Dikembe Mutombo's death as well. That hit people hard as well. He seems to have been a remarkable guy, both on and off the court, but off-court contributions to the community being noted, and we seem to have lost a real one there as well. And then Pete Rose, who, I remember from his playing days, and then, of course, the controversial end to his career, which many people are pointing out is really terribly sad and ironic, I guess, now, except Pete Rose was not a nice guy. I guess sort of a Ty Cobb-ish figure, both in his accomplishments on the field, but also the way people ended up feeling about him, because he was kind of, I don't know, maybe it was his competitive drive made him kind of a jerk to a lot of people in a lot of different settings. But it is probably worth noting that Pete Rose banned from the Hall of Fame over sports gambling, and now, at the hour of his death, sports gambling advertising on television and siphoning billions of dollars out of people's pockets. Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on, where are we? Netroots Radio. That's right. Everyone remembers this. Okay, let's see. Here's an opportunity for us to catch up on a few acknowledgments of our, not new, but Patreon boosters who are, boosting. They're boosting. That's a lot of, you get the idea. These are folks who have been Patreon supporters for, I don't know how long. In some cases, I think we can take a quick look at their records, but I don't want to be examining people's records. We'll just thank them for boosting their contributions to the show. Important to do because it means more money. And then we can do more things and feel more confident in ourselves going forward into the future with this. But let's see, I'm behind just a little bit, not too bad this time, on thanking Ernie Polstein for the boost to his contribution, registered on September 29th, which I guess was the date of the anniversary of the Cleveland debate that we were talking about earlier. And just this morning to Ruth L. Tinklepow. Do I have that right? Tinklepaw? I'm not certain about the pronunciation there. P-A-U-G-H at the end there. I'm sorry, Ruth. But Ruth also editing her membership to boost her contribution, and I greatly appreciate it. And I would certainly appreciate any of you evangelizing for the cause. And we're bringing in new subscribers from time to time. And I don't know. I think, as a matter of fact, just recently, a family member, I guess you would have to say, sort of, well, I hate to use the word distant for it, but I mean, it's not any of my brothers just now discovering the program, but a cousin. So who was sort of made aware of the fact that there was such a show and said, oh, politics, though? I don't really want to listen to that. But the review was good in the end. Like, hey, actually, that was kind of interesting. That was a lot better than I thought it was going to be. I thought when you said it was about political matters that I was going to be listening to a podcast like Face the Nation or something like that. And, I find those things boring. Well, luckily, we'll have a lot in common there. I find those things boring, too. But this actually made some sense. Just a nice conversation and able to call BS on things when you hear it,
That's
right?
Bullshit.
Exactly. Like Greg doesn't even have to come on and do it. We can do it. And, of course, all the best sound effects that everyone likes to have. I don't know which one to use for that. Greg's favorite.
What the hell is supposed to do, you moron?
Exactly. I mean, there's no other way to treat today's political news. Okay. So, do evangelize, turn people onto the show. YouTube is an easy way to access it. And of course, our archives are out there. You could get lost in them forever. We've been at this for a long, long time. And, of course, if any of you, own gigantic radio networks, and or have resolved that people on the political left deserve to be paid off at $100,000 per podcast to advocate for our causes, by all means, I am 100% for sale. And I don't know. Probably not. But I could do one show for you and then quit in an outrage and be set for a very long time. So I'm perfectly willing to do that as well. Okay. There are other things I need to share with you. I kind of wanted to go down the rabbit hole of things that the New York Times editorial board endorsement of Kamala Harris led to, because they're important. But just a moment. I will divert your attention for just a second to I guess another anti-endorsement. This was an interesting one, and people were circulating photos of the headline on Blue Sky earlier today and last night from Vanity Fair. And we'll see whether the thing is paywalled and I'm able to read through the whole thing or not. I hope not, because this sounds fun. Rudy Giuliani's daughter is speaking out. I don't think I know that much about Rudy Giuliani's daughter. This is Caroline Rose Giuliani. And I think the only one of Giuliani's kids to whom I've had any exposure is it Andrew Giuliani? Is that his son's name? Who, one, I think he became sort of famous as a kid at one of his dad's mayoral inaugurations, being a little bit impatient, but being cute about it. And I think they were making fun of the whole situation at some point, way back when on Saturday Night Live. And then he grew up and he became Trumpy. I mean, the kid did. So his dad also did. He didn't grow up. He just became Trumpy. But he grew up, became Trumpy, and didn't he serve as like some sort of weird, they created some position from like sports team liaison. So when they were going to bring a championship team to the White House and serve them hamburgers and the things they love. Remember that picture of him with the stacks of Whoppers or whatever the hell? It was crazy. Anyway, and I guess that was Andrew Giuliani's doing. Is it Andrew? I'm not really sure. But anyway, this is Caroline Rose Giuliani, about whom I know nothing except to say that, all right, we're seeing eye to eye on this one, I think. Let's go see. Rudy Giuliani's daughter says, that is to say, headline style, Rudy Giuliani's daughter, Trump took my dad from me. Please don't let him take our country too. And there are a lot of people whom Trump took dads from. Fox News took dads from. Some moms too. But yeah, it's interesting to hear this perspective from her on this one. There's a subheader here, I guess a pull quote. Nothing I have experienced prepared me for the very public and relentless implosion of my father's life, writes Caroline Giuliani, announcing her support for Kamala Harris. So I wonder how old she is, Caroline, and whether we are close in age. It's an interesting, very unique personal version of the sandwich generation thing that Gen Xers are experiencing at the moment, with kids that they need to put through college and parents that they need to cover long-term care in some cases for as they age. And imagine if that care included your father very publicly losing his mind and losing all of his financial assets in a gigantic lawsuit, which, you know, he richly deserves, for having attacked, well, everybody in the country, but in particular the elections workers in Georgia, and has lost hundreds of millions of dollars to them in financial judgments. His assets are going to be seized and sold off. And somebody, you know, Caroline Giuliani, as much as she's angry, I'm sure, with her dad on a political level, is, you know, maybe Andrew made a ton of money from Trump, but, you know, nobody ever makes a ton of money off of Trump and gets to keep it. But maybe he's still got a hold of some and can use it to provide long-term care, if indeed it is a long-term, for during which they're caring for Rudy Giuliani and his decline. But let's get to her thoughts about this. I am constantly asking myself, she begins, how America is back here, even considering the possibility of electing Donald Trump again after all the damage he has caused, both in office and since. While Kamala Harris has gained extraordinary momentum by infusing this election with vitality and hope, I worry that too many Americans remain disconnected from the visceral, psychologically draining memory, oh, I remember that well, of Trump's deeply destabilizing presidency. I'm just reminding myself, and there are some people who are dead set on being reminded of it, or just simply will ignore it or pretend it didn't happen, but it was so draining. It was exhausting to live as a politically aware human being during the Trump presidency. And it's similarly exhausting when he's not in the presidency. Just the fact that he still exists and says things and gets coverage for them is exhausting all by itself. But yeah, when he's president, it's far worse. Just remembering, I mean, the relentless pace of it. I remember complaining for a while, like, it used to be that weekends were a relief. He ruined weekends. Honestly, America, rise up and destroy Donald Trump. Stamp him out of your lives. He was ruining your weekends. Anyway, and even if you were a fan, he was supercharging your weekends by telling you about stuff that you hated and feared so that you got more hateful and more fearful over the weekend. What happened to crack open a beer and watch a ball game and relax? You had to boycott the beer and boycott the ball game if you wanted to be on his side. And, you know, you didn't. Just like this new boycott they were calling for, and I forget even which one. Oh, yeah, right, the sandwich shop. Look, they'll forget, you know, it's bad news, but they'll forget that pretty quickly. Tonight, by the way, in the debate, Tim Walz can hit him over that and say, you know, why are you now going after good jobs, good Pennsylvania jobs being destroyed or at least threatened by your maniacs phoning in bomb threats to a sandwich shop because they delayed you for 15 minutes before you could have your event? And you keep doing this. It keeps happening as though it were on purpose. Donut shops, you F up the advance. Sandwich shops, F up the advance. Everywhere you go. I'm beginning to think that maybe the strategy for JD Vance to get press coverage is, let's do ambush events, get delayed, and then tell our supporters that the delay is discrimination and they need to attack and boycott the business that is delaying us, even though the reason they're delaying us is we just show up with a huge entourage and demand to take over the place at lunchtime. So I think that's what's going on. And that reminds me, that'll be a segue later on, if I can make a note to myself about Trump's latest lies. But that this is an MO for them, is that they set up an impossible situation and then watch it resolve itself, and then criticize the resolution and say, what I'm talking about here, by the way, is the latest lies. They've moved on. They'll go back to it about lying about Haitian immigrants. That's one of their greatest hits for their rally crowds now. But they are now lying about the hurricane relief effort, this massive effort that's underway under really seriously horrific conditions, which is always the case with a natural disaster. But in this case, you can't get relief supplies to people via ground transportation. Everything has to be brought in by airplane or by boat or helicopter. There's no road connections. It's very, very difficult to get this aid where it's going. And yet thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of relief workers are on the ground. Thousands of tons of relief supplies are on the ground. And Donald Trump is out there telling people that that's not happening and that they are favoring Biden voters over Trump voters, which is not even a real thing to do. And it's not something Democrats actually do. That's an every Republican accusation is a confession series entry for you. But yeah, telling people that they're ignoring relief efforts because they're angry at Trump supporters and they don't want to help Trump supporters. So ginning up more distrust in government, lying about the relief efforts. We're going to end up having to dispose of this guy eventually. But maybe after, or maybe as a part of his own purge, too. That would be very interesting. Anyway, we'll get to all of those topics later on. Let's go back to Caroline Giuliani's thoughts here about what's going on. The deeply destabilizing presidency possibly returning. If enough people truly remembered what the chaos felt like, and it's happening again right in front of your very eyes, in case you were wondering, another Trump term wouldn't even be on the table. But for those open to seeing the bare and unvarnished truth, there are unmistakable reminders of Trump's destructive trail all around us. And it has broken my heart to watch my dad become one of them. Not my dad, thankfully, but okay. As Rudy Giuliani's daughter, oh boy, I'm unfortunately well suited to remind Americans of just how calamitous being associated with Trump can be. Everything Trump touches dies. Even for those who are convinced he's on their side. Watching my dad's life crumble since he joined forces with Trump has been extraordinarily painful, and I'm sure costly as well, both on a personal level and because his demise feels linked to a dark force that threatens to once again consume America. And that always sucks. Not to disregard individual accountability in the slightest, but it would be naive for us to ignore the fact that many of those closest to Trump have descended into catastrophic downward spirals. If we let Trump back in the driver's seat this fall, our country will be no exception. I'm curious what the link is for catastrophic downward spirals. Let me see. I think I opened up too many windows here. This is another New York Times piece. The dangers of Donald Trump from those who know him. The editorial board, I think this is something that they were referring to also with the link in their endorsement, Kamala Harris endorsement that we just read. All right. Continuing on, my dad and I, Caroline Giuliani says, have a cartoonishly complicated relationship. But he is still my father, and despite his faults, I love him. I've seen him experience surreal heights and now unfathomable lows. The last thing I want to do is hurt him, especially when he's already down. Plus, we never know how much time we have left with our parents. The totality of that makes this the most difficult piece I've ever written. Yet this moment and this election are so much bigger than any of us. From reproductive rights and the economy to foreign and environmental policy, we need experienced, sane, and fundamentally decent leaders who will fight for us instead of against us, who will safeguard our democracy rather than dismantle it. And as a recently engaged to be married 35-year-old, she's considerably younger than I am, who hopes to feel more joyous than fearful about the potential of becoming a parent myself, I need to advocate for a future worth bringing children into, which is why I am voicing my adamant support for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. I'll never forget the night my dad told me he was considering becoming Trump's lawyer. Sorry. I just can't imagine it. I was with him at the Grand Havana Room, which, question your life choices when you land there. A cigar bar at the top of 666 Fifth Avenue, which, again, question your life choices if you don't hesitate going into 666 anything, just for a moment. There's something wrong with you. But okay. In he goes to 666 Fifth Avenue to the top floor at the Grand Havana Room. And it, by the way, it goes on to say, an address too fitting given the unholy alliance my father was about to enter into. Just in case the address didn't trigger it for you, that's the building that Jared Kushner got his family into buying, and it has cost them so much money, and they have such huge balloon mortgage payments to make that he has had to go out and seek the strange, let's say, unusual and strange relationship that he has with so many Middle Eastern countries, or at least their sovereign wealth funds that we were telling you about the other day. His private equity firm that, for some reason, after having been a top White House advisor for 4 years, he's been unable to raise, a penny, really, well, maybe 2 pennies from any domestic sources, which is incredible. But all of it from, or most of it from the Middle East, and all of the problems that it brings, and it's basically just a very elaborate grift, and it's not even all that elaborate. But the whole thing had to happen because he needed to find a way to get $1 billion scot-free so that he could save the family's ownership of this stupid, horrible building. Anyway, that's where they're going, and that's where she finds out that Rudy is considering becoming Trump's lawyer. Surrounded by thick smoke and powerful men, I ugly cried for a few minutes, then spent the next 3 hours making my vehement case to my father that he not go down this morally perilous path. It was extremely rare for my dad to tell me he was going to do anything before actually doing it, so this moment of connection with him also felt like a cosmic opportunity to do my part to limit the spread of Trump's sinister shadow. I held nothing back. I voiced all of my concerns about Trump's open racism, rampant misogyny, and total lack of empathy. I even told my dad that I already felt ashamed of my last name whenever I saw headlines connecting him with Trump, and that this escalation would only deepen that feeling. For the rest of that night, I held on to hope that a daughter's emotional entreaty might actually sway a father. That fantasy was dispelled the next morning, when a news story popped onto my feed. Rudy Giuliani was going to work for Donald Trump. The pit I felt in my stomach then was a warning, but I had no idea how much destruction my father would come to face due to his one-sided fealty to a con man. Growing up in Gracie Mansion, I always knew I had a privileged life. But a particular set of challenges came along with being Rudy Giuliani's daughter, and by that point in my life I had mostly learned how to navigate them. But nothing I had experienced prepared me for the very public and relentless implosion of my father's life. And by the way, if there's anything at all that Rudy Giuliani will feel in all of this, it will be the loss of everything that he could have claimed that he worked to build to pass on to his children evaporating. Anyway, or I think I said that the collapse of all of it and then it's not the collapse is not evaporating. That's proceeding apace. As someone who overcame a deeply ingrained eating disorder, I did not know that, and has worked through various other manifestations of anxiety and depression, That makes sense of it now, I think. I'm no stranger to processing complicated feelings, but this new albatross left me floored by a potent mix of fear, anger, confusion, and sadness that often had me crying over my dad and for him at the same time. I always saw flaws in my dad that people blinded by his celebrity couldn't see, but on some level, the absurd scale of his success and notoriety also made it hard to believe that anything would actually take him down. He certainly believed that. I spent a lot of my life wishing my father had less power, but I never wanted it to happen like this. And selfishly, the deeper my dad gets stuck in the quicksand of his problems, the more fleeting our opportunities to connect as father and daughter become. After months of feeling the type of sorrow that comes from the death of a loved one, it dawned on me that I've been grieving the loss of my dad to Trump. I cannot bear to lose our country to him, too. I know that some people may question whether I truly care about my father, since another Trump presidency could theoretically mitigate some of the problems he's facing. It distresses me to think that my dad might even wonder this. But if you zoom out, Trump being the president was the worst thing that ever happened to my dad, to my family, and to our nation's modern history. The consequences will only be more severe and irreversible the second time around. Thanks to the extremist Supreme Court he stacked, Trump would take office with full immunity. No checks on his power whatsoever. Well, one check, the Benjamin Franklin check. Let's not, totally ignore that one. And yes, that's probably what she means about the consequences being not only more severe, but irreversible. Like if you now want to be finished with Donald Trump and or Rudy Giuliani, there aren't any checks and balances left to do it. You can't put them in prison. You can't impeach them. You can't exile them. Nothing. There's only one thing that removes them from public life. Whether you force the issue or nature takes its course, there's only one way out. They have seen to that. They've blocked all the exits. Anyway, as we were saying, yes, thanks to the extremist Supreme Court that he stacked, he would take office, Trump would, with full immunity, no checks on his power whatsoever. If the president isn't going to be subject to the law like every other citizen, which remains incomprehensible to me, then our president had better have a moral compass or, powerful enemies. A 34-time convicted felon who's been found liable for sexual abuse, tries to steal elections, and demeans people based on their race, sexuality, disability status, and gender falls remarkably short of the bar we must set for ourselves as a country. Fortunately, we have another choice in this election, a lifelong public servant who has spent her career upholding justice and fighting for those who cannot fight for themselves. The Supreme Court's immunity ruling was a huge blow to the structure of democracy, our democracy in particular, and Trump has made it clear that he intends to continue ravaging our noble experiment until there is nothing left of it. That's an international lesson for you there, too. I mean, I don't know. I guess to the extent that American democracy has ever been held up as an example to the rest of the world, the undermining of it could be detrimental around the world. Although I do like to think that at this point people will have been able to realize, well, I like democracy, and it doesn't mean we have to copy the United States. But it does pose a challenge in that it will the collapse of the United States into fascism will inspire local fascists to try and precipitate the same change, but we can resist them. They don't need to collapse just because we did. But at any rate, yes, the Supreme Court's immunity ruling was a huge blow to democracy everywhere, I guess. And Trump has made clear that he intends to continue ravaging our noble experiment. The aspiring autocrat has told his supporters that this is the last time they'll ever have to vote because, quote, it'll be fixed after that. And, of course, Elon Musk says they won't be able to vote if it goes the other way. So win or lose, this is the last election, according to Trump's people. There's no good way to spin that. Whether he means that elections will be fixed, elections will be eradicated, or that the country will be permanently fixed, quote-unquote fixed, due to the demolition of institutions and policies that ensure checks and balances on power, it's clear he's a narcissist in pursuit of authoritarian rule. A democracy, by definition, cannot be fixed or calcified. It must have the flexibility to change according to the wishes of its people, not the despotic dreams of one. Listening to those wishes, even when it seemed inconceivably late for President Joe Biden to pull out, is exactly what led to Kamala Harris being on the top of the ticket. Her rapid rise is a literal manifestation of citizens' voices being heard, which is exactly the type of consideration and respect all Americans will get if she is elected. That is an interesting point. Beyond the existential importance of this election, I'm also voting for Harris because she's the only candidate who cares about my rights as a woman. The reversal of Roe v. Wade was a shocking and horrifying accomplishment, quote unquote, of Trump's that has already resulted in the unforgivable and unnecessary deaths of innocent women like Amber Nicole Thurman. Linked to her story here, seeing Republican state officials enact draconian abortion bans and threaten fertility care, amazingly enough, is incredibly personal for me. As a woman in my 30s struggling with long COVID-related health issues, there's a possibility that my soon-to-be husband and I will need to rely on surrogacy or fertility treatments if we want to have children of our own, and be sure to name the correct fertility treatment or else fact check, you're wrong. Having the means to even consider surrogacy is a tremendous privilege that I do not take lightly, but it also stirs up many complex and challenging emotions. So I've spent the last couple of years talking to countless women about their fertility journeys, and may I add, those are extraordinarily expensive. Even when I don't know how much insurance coverage there is for that. I mean, it might be covered, but it might be partially covered. But they're expensive treatments, and it's not easily available to everyone. And if you all of a sudden find yourself with extraordinary financial pressure and taking care of a now destitute elderly parent, is it on the table anymore? I don't know. I don't know what kind of income she's got, but, hopefully for her sake, she's covered in both. I don't know. Anyway, seeing Republican state officials do these, enact these horrible bans is a huge problem for someone in her position, as she was saying, and maybe she and her soon-to-be husband will need to rely on surrogacy or fertility treatments if they want to have children of their own. Having the means to even consider it, tremendous privilege. I think we got through that. So, she says, I've spent the last couple of years talking to women about their own journeys with fertility treatments. Witnessing their strength has been inspiring and has also made clear that fertility struggles necessitate tremendous courage and grace and money. I have to add that. So, the fact that the Roe reversal has given states the leeway to make the IVF process even more uncertain is a disgrace. And hearing Trump flip-flop on the issues of abortion and IVF only makes me trust him less, if that's even possible, because his lies are so clearly politically motivated. He's already caused irreparable damage, and I don't believe for a second that he won't cause more. And you got good instincts there. Now, there's more, and I'd like to continue with this very interesting and introspective article after this break. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Yeah, a couple of long reads to get through today. We were in the middle of Caroline Giuliani's reflection on having lost her father, Rudy Giuliani, to Trump world, and what it personally means for her, but also, of course, for the country at large. So, we had just read about her own interest in reproductive health and freedoms, both the abortion healthcare angle and IVF treatments now also under threat with the possibility of a looming Trump presidency. And the chaos that this has wrought. As she says at the end of the last paragraph, he's already caused irreparable damage, and I don't believe for a second that he won't cause more. Trump has tried to distance himself from Project 2025, which would, quote, explicitly reject the notion that abortion is health care, unquote, and require the Department of Health and Human Services to preclude doctors and nurses from being trained to perform abortions, But his insincere denial so clearly stems from his growing political insecurity. Project 2025's contributors include several high-ranking officials from Trump's first administration, and one of Project 2025's authors, Russell Vogt, was secretly recorded acknowledging that Trump is, in fact, quote, very supportive of what they do. I believe it because everything in Project 2025, from eradicating the Department of Education and FEMA to decimating unions and reinstating Schedule F so that the administration can hire and fire government employees for political reasons, is woefully in line with the malfeasance and backsliding that Trump has already proven he stands for. It is a dictator's playbook, one he didn't have before. Trump will be much more effective in a second time around, and I don't see how our world can survive it. We live at a crossroads in history. And by the way, I should just point out for a second, in case you find something, difficult to agree with in that statement, you could at least view it this way. Even if you don't believe Trump will be much more effective in a second term, Trump's lackeys will be much more effective in a second term. He'll be drifting in la-la land and have maybe no idea what's going on, but he will have unleashed people who think they do know what's going on, and will be executing these policies with or without his understanding, acknowledgement, or knowledge at all. He may have no clue what the hell is going on, and he won't care, and he won't ask about it, and if they tell him, they lie to him, and he'll say, great, it's a good thing, or they'll tell him the truth, and he'll say, yeah, great, it's a good thing. So anyway, if that is your objection, don't worry about it. We live at a crossroads in history. We always do, really, where the future of not only our democracy, but our planet is at stake. Trump's first-term position on climate crisis was to call it a hoax while stripping away climate regulations and giving the fossil fuel industry everything they wanted and more. His second-term agenda, which we can foresee through his grotesque Project 2025 playbook, will only accelerate the damage he's already done. My dream of becoming a mom, coupled with the difficult health journey I've been on over the last 3 years, has me constantly grappling with our increasingly toxic and dangerous environment. But I do feel hope because Kamala Harris understands the grave danger of climate change. As only the second presidential candidate in history to be endorsed by Scientific American, she'll be a champion for our children's futures by reinstating the United States as a member of the Paris Agreement and continuing to fight for renewable energy policy. We've seen remarkable progress on this issue under the Biden-Harris Inflation Reduction Act. Trump would roll it back. Kamala Harris is our only chance for a better future. Even though the last few years have been some of the most difficult in my life on a personal level, I'm grateful to live in a country that came together once before to fire a burgeoning tyrant. Watching Harris reignite that torch that Biden selflessly passed to her has me filled with optimism and pride. She has the experience, intelligence, and fortitude to lead us to a brighter future, and seeing her hold Trump accountable in the debate only further confirms her ability to defend us from our most dangerous enemies, foreign and domestic. But even with all the incredible momentum the Harris Walls ticket has generated, we still have to work hard to ensure a victory for our future. We live in a two-party system, and no candidate will appeal to every voter on every issue. If, for whatever reason, you choose to sit this election out, or lodge a protest vote for a third-party candidate, make no mistake, you are voting for Donald Trump. Take it from me, Trump destroys everything he touches. Kills, really. I saw it happen in my family. Don't let it happen to yours or to your country, our country. Kamala Harris will guide us into a brighter future, but only if we unite behind her. On November 5th, I'll be voting for that future. Please vote early, by the way, for justice, stability, and democracy, and I sincerely hope that you'll cast your ballot for Kamala Harris, too, and that you'll do it as soon as possible. Please get it on the record. You never know what the hell's going to happen in this world. Consider yourself like Jimmy Carter, whose 100th birthday, I believe, is today, or at least nearabouts to today, such that I'm seeing everybody mention it on social media, and he had just recently said that his only goal really remaining in life at this point is to live long enough to cast his ballot for Kamala Harris. Early voting starts in Georgia in about 2 weeks, I think I saw mentioned, so good 15 days away. And, well, best of luck, and all our good thoughts for Jimmy Carter's being able to hang on and cast that vote. And hey, that he lives to see the inauguration would be an excellent bonus as well. Okay. So, other things to add to the record for today. Gosh, there's a lot. And the good news is that this reminds me that there'll be plenty to record for Thursday. Whether or not I have the energy to do it, well, that's something different. All right, let's see. So I said I was going to remind you of this news, and let's see if I can't get all the way to it from the New Republic. Greg Sargent, everybody loves Greg Sargent, has a new entry here, which is in podcast form, but I wanted to sort of raise the specter anyway. That, the title of the write-up of the podcast is Horror in North Carolina. Now, we all know about the recovery efforts there and the damage that's been done by the storms. But the new horror is that Trump is already pushing ugly, hateful new lies about Helene as Hurricane Helene. Oops, the pop-up. Why don't we get it out of the way for the moment? As Hurricane Helene unleashes devastation and Trump viciously lies about it, a top North Carolina Democrat responds to Trump and offers an emotional account of the mounting toll. Remember, this is the whole story is in podcast form, which is linked to and available here. And how long is this podcast, by the way? I'm just sort of curious. Is this just a clip of it? A 3-minute clip? Oh, yeah, here's the actual podcast itself. Do I have to hit play in order to get a countdown? I don't think the sound is on, so I think I can hit the play. Oh, it's not even going to tell me? I don't like this function. All right. I can. There we go. I can zoom all. So it's like a 20-minute podcast. A format we have yet to experiment with. 1,800 short hits a week, and rather than daily shows. But I think I kind of like this format that we have. But his format is probably smarter in terms of having people share it. Anyway, the write-up briefly is here. Western North Carolina. Oh, there's a transcript. Do we want to go through that? Western North Carolina is enduring a full-blown catastrophe. In the wake of Hurricane Helene, towns have been destroyed. You know this. Roads have been washed out. You're aware. People are frantically trying to locate loved ones. That's unwelcome reminder of disasters, man-made and natural in the past. But yes, an awful lot of people missing and unaccounted for as a result of the nature of these floods. And, of course, dozens have died. I believe the death toll is over 100 already throughout the region, which is astonishing for modern-day United States, honestly. Enter Donald Trump, who just declared that the federal government and Democratic Governor Roy Cooper are deliberately neglecting MAGA parts of the state, and charged that the Biden administration is consciously letting Americans drown. We talked to State Democratic Party Chair Anderson Clayton about the horrors that the state is suffering and about Trump's ugly reaction to them. Listen to the episode here. There are links, and a transcript is provided as well. I mean, maybe we want to comb through a little bit of the transcript, because we can't just, steal his podcast and fill our podcast with his. That's not right. You should be subscribing to his podcast as well. But sending all your money to me, I don't know. He's made inroads. He's got a little bit more infrastructure behind him, which I hope is sustaining him. It's an excellent, always an excellent resource. Both him, Brian Boyler as well. Two that I'd love to be, let's say, raking in Donald Trump money so that I could be distributing it to them, or that they were raking in that money, even though I don't know if I have any indication that either of them would redistribute toward me. But I think I'm less influential on their podcasts and writing than vice versa. So time to pony up, perhaps. Okay. But yeah, the lie here is that Biden is somehow, and that the governor are ignoring MAGA parts of the state, which is exactly what Donald Trump would be doing and did do. And don't forget that, another 4 years ago sort of situation. Had this storm struck 4 years ago, the only relief you'd be getting was a few paper towels being tossed your way. But also, by the way, in terms of the setup of the things, I think we mentioned, setups and then complaints about them. Not only JD Vance intentionally, I think, getting himself thrown out of venues where he's trying to do campaign events and then complaining about it and sparking anger and frustration, which is the only way he connects with the MAGA crowd. But similarly, Greg mentioned yesterday that there was a delay in declaring Tennessee to be, in part at least, a federal disaster area. And that had to do, though, with the fact that the Republican governor of Tennessee delayed and refused to make the request. And that's all it is. All you have to do is request federal disaster aid to get that declaration. And the president, a real president, will just do it because he realizes that's his obligation to the people of Tennessee. So the governor of Tennessee delayed in doing so. Don't let Joe Biden get headlines for himself and for Democrats about effectively responding to the storm. I will drown people in Tennessee so that I can then complain, where's the federal government in all of this? Even though I know very well that I was the one who was supposed to make this request to set this in motion. So first he delayed, then he got the publicity hit that he wanted, and then he quietly made the request for aid and got it. Anyway, here is the transcript of Greg Sargent's discussion with the chair of the North Carolina Democratic Party that they were talking to. Greg sets things up. It's Anderson Clayton they're speaking to. Greg says, right now, Western North Carolina is in the midst of a full-blown catastrophe. We know all about that. Here comes Trump. In a pair of truly ghoulish messages on social media, Trump declared that the federal government and North Carolina's Democratic Governor Roy Cooper are deliberately neglecting MAGA parts of the state. Trump said President Biden and Vice President Harris are deliberately letting Americans drown in the state and elsewhere in the South. And then they talked to North Carolina Dem Chair Anderson Clayton about all of this. They thank one another for allowing them on the show and for being on the show. And Greg asks, Anderson, the stories coming out of the western part of the state are just heartbreaking. Can you bring us up to date on what's going on? And we find out all about that and all of the roads that are collapsed and where people can find shelter. This is all important, but what I've brought this up for is I want to get to the stories that Trump is telling so we can pinpoint it and highlight. Although, I mean, really, you get the idea. So here I think is the exchange that includes this. As far as I can tell, Greg Sargent says, Republicans and Democrats pulling together at a time of disaster, not attacking each other, with one exception, Donald Trump. He enters the picture. Now, look, I get that people are not going to want to think about Trump at a time like this, but Trump is running for president, and what he's just done is a reminder of what kind of president he's been and would be again. I guess, has Mark Robinson said anything, by the way, in the middle of this? He's the lieutenant governor of this state. He's notably absent in all of this. Anyway, he figured out a way to pretend that MAGA parts of the state are being neglected, Trump did, deliberately. He claimed that a photo on social media showing Vice President Harris working the phones on a disaster has been staged. What's your response to all of this? And Clayton says, no one right now should be stoking division at a time when we're still having missing people in a state like this. To your point, we have seen Republicans working together, local elected state legislative leaders, and Democrats and Republicans that have been making sure that resources get up to the western part of the state, doing supply drives together. What you see on the ground is a lot different than what you see represented in the Republican Party nationally right now for just how communities are rallying. Roy Cooper, as a governor, does not care whether you're a Republican or Democrat right now. He cares that you're a North Carolinian, and that you're struggling or that you need help or that someone in your family is still missing and you don't know where they are. We have definitely had folks that we know are still out there that may have walked or had to leave their cars because of flooding. There was someone we heard of the other day, his son had walked almost 11 miles to get home. He had no idea where he was or if he was all right, but had gotten through there through the woods. Just making sure that we're taking care of people. And Donald Trump doesn't even seem to have any interest in doing that or making sure that people are okay in North Carolina. And Sargent continues, he's just doing something altogether different from what most Republicans are doing. Republicans are calling for everyone to pull together. Republicans are not saying what Trump is saying. Trump claimed Governor Brian Kemp of Georgia, which is also getting hammered, had trouble getting President Biden on the phone. But Kemp then said he got Biden quickly, and Biden offered Kemp whatever he needs. I think Kemp said he appreciated that. Even Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin, a Republican, also praised the federal response. It's Trump and MAGA influencers who are using this disaster to inflame their people. Republicans aren't doing this. Democrats aren't doing this. What are you personally hearing from other Republicans on the ground? What's the chatter? He asks to Clayton. And he says, I'll be honest, today I was talking with the Iredell Dems chair, Beth Kendall. Anybody that's interested, if you're in Statesville right now or any of the surrounding areas, like I said earlier, I-40 is closed, getting out to the western part of the state through Statesville. But our Democratic headquarters out there is still doing supply drives and actually making sure that we've got tractor trailers that are busing supplies up to Watauga, maybe, county, and counties surrounded like Polk County as well in that region. I was on the phone with Beth Kendall talking about what we could do to coordinate more resources, and she had someone, a Moms for Liberty voter, that came in and said, I wish that our side was doing this and had their headquarters open. It doesn't have to be something that's polarizing to folks. That is pretty interesting. And Greg agrees. It isn't. It doesn't have to be like that, but that's what Trump does. I think we need to talk a little bit about what this says about a second Trump term. What would it be like? He was president during a global disaster, COVID. His incompetence and derangement caused untold numbers of needless deaths. But additionally, he has used COVID as a chance to divide people. He said nasty and vicious things about blue states and their need for federal help and so forth. We don't need to recap all of that here, but when Trump falsely claims Biden and Harris are doing the things he's actually did do, it's not only a grotesque lie, it's also a reminder that this is how he sees the world, including at times of disaster. Shouldn't people take that under advisement right now? Well, of course they should. And I think you get the picture from this portion of the transcript. But there you have it. He's just being Trump, I guess. Trump being Trump, which means a vile liar that divides people and costs people lives unnecessarily and viciously, and for what he hopes is political gain, which will actually go for naught because I'm pretty sure he'll be trounced in the upcoming election. All right, let's see. Other things to join and to add to all this. Gosh, there's a lot. I should see if I can find this too. I am pretty sure that I saw that while other states were dispatching their rescue teams and National Guard units, et cetera, urban search and rescue teams to the area, not only to Western North Carolina, but to Tennessee, to Georgia, wherever there is damage like this from the storm, and in southwestern Virginia, and really it went all the way up to southern Ohio, as I understand it, and other states dispatching their help more or less, without prejudice or interest. Of course, Florida, which also was damaged in the storm, but not nearly in the same way and with the same impact, surprisingly enough, since they were the first ones to bear the brunt of it, as some of these other areas. But that Florida is dispatching rescue workers and National Guard troops as well. But if I saw correctly, DeSantis doing it in a uniquely DeSantis way, basically saying, I'm sending resources up to Western North Carolina with the objective of helping to evacuate Floridians who might be stranded in the area, not offering help to North Carolinians who need it so much as, well, I want to rescue Floridians and Floridians only. And I'm sure he's probably also checking their voter registration as well and, turning away the Democrats. Sorry, boat's full, can't help you. But I thought that was a really weird and interesting approach to things. And very Project 2025, if you ask me. I'm going to have to check on whether I can find an article that establishes that, because it's really kind of unbelievable to me. But it does remind me that we must have read at some point that Project 2025's outline for emergency response, not only privatizing the weather services, et cetera, so you don't get warnings unless you subscribe, but also that disaster response not only would be, you'd cut federal disaster aid and send the responsibility for it back to the states, but there was a hint of this, but no explicit mention of this. But then I saw what looked like DeSantis manifesting this, that state response would be like this, that they would be not sending aid to other states, but disaster aid would be designed to come in from out of state just to extract your citizens from harm's way and leave the locals, to their own devices. Maybe you would send them some rescue efforts if they were governed by Republicans, which North Carolina isn't, so he's just not interested in helping. I just thought that was really remarkable. How would I look for this? DeSantis response, Helene. Let's see if that brings anything up. I don't know if I know which one it was. I think I saw this on social media, but let's see. DeSantis' response to Hurricane Helene could define his future. That's Politico, but that might have been about his response to damage in Florida. I'm just sort of curious. Well, let's see. Ron DeSantis has effectively inserted himself into some of the most high-profile fights in the nation, from COVID to immigration. But the latest battle he faces has thrust Florida into the national spotlight, and something he didn't choose: Hurricane Helene's wreckage. So far, at least, yeah. So speaking about, I think, Florida-based relief. But, I'm just sort of curious if we can find, well, I'll have to look for it afterwards. I have to caution you that that's just my offhand recollection of having seen something circulated on social media. I'm sorry I didn't put it aside, because, it actually strikes me as quite astounding and, so astounding that it might not even be true. But it's easy to believe these things about Ron DeSantis. All right. So we'll backtrack and try and find that either during the next break or perhaps after the show, just to see if we can't establish this as fact. Let me add this then before the break. We'll see, I think, a relatively short-ish read. Washington Post bringing us a little bit up to date on what happened to that big giant story about how Egypt was bribing everybody and how come that isn't getting any attention. Well, it isn't. But here's a story about what happened when Senate Democrats found out it wasn't getting any attention. So now there's a new news hook for it. Senate Democrats seek probe into DOJ investigation of Trump and Egypt. A secret Justice Department investigation into whether Trump accepted $10 million from the Egyptian president was closed in 2020. Who was president at that point? I can't remember. Despite prosecutors and FBI agents having sought to take additional steps, the Post previously reported and now reminds us, thanks to Aaron Davis and Carol Leonig, publishing this morning, Democratic members of the Senate Judiciary Committee sent the Justice Department's Inspector General a letter Monday asking him to investigate whether Trump's appointees interfered with and ultimately blocked a criminal probe into U.S. intelligence that the Egyptian government sought to give Donald Trump $10 million to boost his 2016 presidential campaign. Wow. I didn't realize it was that early on, but I did probably, and I've just forgotten, because we did read these articles. The request for DOJ's watchdog to review how the case ended comes after a Washington Post article in August revealed details of a secret Justice Department investigation that was closed despite prosecutors and agents having sought to take additional investigative steps. The Post reported that 5 days before Trump took office, an amount nearly identical to the $10 million described in the intelligence about Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi was withdrawn at a bank in Cairo in U.S. $100 bills from an account linked to the Egyptian General Intelligence Service. The discovery of the withdrawal early in 2019 intensified the secret investigation, but Attorney General William P. Barr later personally involved himself in the case, urging FBI leaders to impose adult supervision on agents seeking to obtain Trump's bank records to see whether they could find evidence that money made its way to Trump, the Post reported. Michael Sherwin, the then acting U.S. attorney, yes, of course, there's sound effects for that, right, who closed the case in 2020, told the Post he did so for lack of evidence. And he was, acting attorney general for 25 minutes or so. I don't know whether he really made adequate inquiries into the lack of evidence. 4 members of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Senators Richard Blumenthal, Mazie Hirono, Alex Padilla, and Sheldon Whitehouse, signed a letter asking DOJ Inspector General Michael Horowitz to investigate a pattern of conduct that includes improper political interference, ignoring standards for recusal, and abrogating Attorney General guidelines, among other improper considerations. The four wrote that if the case was improperly cut short, such meddling is cause for grave concern to the integrity of the Justice Department under then-President Trump and to our democratic processes more broadly. Asked for comment, the Trump campaign called reporting about Trump in Egypt textbook fake news. The Justice Department investigation found no wrongdoing and was closed, said spokesman Stephen Chung, accusing the senators of trying to meddle in the upcoming election. I better not have senators doing that. Barr did not respond to a request for comment. That's their catch-all excuse now, of course. Last month, top Democrats on the House Oversight Committee sent Trump a letter asking whether he ever illegally received money from the government of Egypt. He's likely to answer that, right? Trump did not respond to the letter, according to spokeswoman for Jamie Raskin. Making their case for Horowitz to investigate, the four senators wrote that foreign interference in U.S. elections is a major national security concern, and the acceptance of foreign campaign contributions, if true, would constitute a federal crime. Oh no, not one of those. Moreover, interference into a sensitive investigation of the then president by senior DOJ officials appointed by that president would constitute an egregious breach of the department's rules and procedures, as well as a severe threat to the impartial administration of justice. Accordingly, we urge you to conduct a full and comprehensive investigation into these deeply troubling reports. Thank you for that phrase, Susan Collins. Horowitz did not immediately respond to an email seeking comment. Well, see, he could have blocked the Hunter Biden investigation the whole time.
Sup, fam? It's your boy Darwin, a.k.a. Darwin_Darko, a.k.a. the most reasonable man in America, a.k.a. KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. All right, so I did find, I think, what I was looking for. I was searching around for Ron DeSantis' response to the damage in other states besides Florida from Hurricane Helene, and I found, I think, two of the things that I had seen before. One is the Blue Sky entry from Tyler King. Who is Tyler King? Tyler King is, a writer in her own right, just sort of, I don't know what, general malcontent is how she describes herself. Ghost writer as well. Maybe that's part of her malcontentiousness. What's happening? Well, how do I modify that word? Anyway, author of The Debt and Riot Street. And she's got like a literary agent and everything. So excellent published author. And I spotted her mention of Florida sending crews to help with storm rescues in North Carolina. But it's this part, she says, of this Orlando Sentinel article that she cites that got me. Let's see, there's a big screen grab here and then a highlighted piece in the middle. The screen grab reads, Florida, we have it handled, DeSantis said. We have what we need. Most of the effort should be in Western North Carolina right now because you still have active rescues that need to take place. And that's probably true. And then the highlighted bit says, DeSantis said he's also sending rescue teams to North Carolina where many Floridians have second homes. That is an interesting motivation for sending your rescue teams. We're going to be bringing people to safety, he said. I don't think they have any major way to get out of those western North Carolina places right now. That's going to require us doing the air missions. And now, that doesn't exactly make it 100% clear of what's going on there, but then there was this Blue Sky post from our good friend, longtime friend, SFDB, and for a while, been on Blue Sky, noting the existence, thanks to a story linked to CBS12.com here, Operation Blue Ridge. What's it all about? There's a quote here. Operation Blue Ridge, it is said, will focus on helping Floridians who need rescue in western North Carolina, the Blue Ridge Mountains, and the Tennessee Valley. If you're trapped and you need to be rescued by Governor Ron DeSantis, better have a Florida driver's license. Okay, well, I guess they're actually checking. Let's see. By the way, speaking of Florida and Florida response, I also want to note that Ellie here, E-L-L-Y, Ellie Zoe, Ellyzoe on Blue Sky, who has watched this development and I guess screen grabbed it probably from Twitter. Matt Gaetz out on Twitter yesterday, mouthing off saying, "Dear Congress, on behalf of my fellow Florida man in grave need of assistance, just send us like half of what you sent Ukraine. Signed, your fellow Americans." He was complaining about, where's all the relief for Florida in all of this? How come the federal government isn't bailing us out, even though we would be rejecting it? And Representative Jerry Connolly from right here in Northern Virginia answering, we passed a bill on Friday that included $18.8 billion for FEMA hurricane response. Every Florida Republican, including you, Matt Gaetz, voted no. So if you're worried about the speed of response, I guess you could look at yourself on that one. But where's the money? Just send us half of what you gave to Ukraine. Ha ha. LOL, YOLO. Nothing matters. But voting no on the federal response and then asking, where's my federal response? Again, same thing. Just like JD Vance, trying to barge into businesses and then saying, hey, I'm being discriminated against. You should boycott this business. And Bill Lee in Tennessee, I won't ask for federal disaster assistance, and then accusing Biden of withholding federal disaster assistance. And Matt Gaetz voting no on federal disaster assistance and then saying, where the hell is it? These are your people, Florida. Straighten your stuff out. Okay, so let's see. The Orlando Sentinel article that was referenced about helping with storm rescues in North Carolina. Let's see if this one's available and how long it is. What's the headline on this one? DeSantis, Florida handled, send Helene aid to North Carolina. Okay. And then, of course, right. So don't send federal disaster aid to Florida. We're okay. Send it to North Carolina. And then, tip off to Matt Gaetz. You can go and accuse the federal government of ignoring Florida now. We've set that up for you. Let's see. And I want to see whether perhaps the CBS News report about Operation Blue Ridge is perhaps more on point here. Florida's multi-state mission to assist in the hurricane aftermath, writes Sophie Pendrell of the, what's the outlet here? CBS, like I said, CBS12.com, so the local CBS affiliate. On Sunday, Governor Ron DeSantis announced a response to assist North Carolina and Tennessee in the wake of Hurricane Helene. Operation Blue Ridge aims to provide crucial recovery assistance to storm-affected individuals, DeSantis' office stated. Officials reported that various Florida agencies, including the Florida Division of Emergency Management, Florida State Guard, Florida National Guard, they're two different things, by the way, Florida Department of Transportation, Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, and, let's get this pop-up out of the way, and a law enforcement coordination task force will spearhead a comprehensive multi-state effort. In addition, authorities noted that the operation will focus on helping Floridians who need rescue in western North Carolina, the Blue Ridge Mountains, and Tennessee Valley. It was reported that the mission will deploy a large range of personnel and resources, including a bunch of stuff. Let's see, Florida Division of Emergency Management, All Hazards Incident Management Team, Communication Unit, Strike Team, a Telecommunications Emergency Response Task Force. There's a whole, list here. 10 truckloads of water, totaling approximately 42,550 gallons, and over 100 Starlink satellite communications devices. Got to inject Elon Musk into all this. The Florida State Guard, all of these. Rather than read you the list of items, I guess they're not really going on to detail whether or not they will actually offer any help to anyone who doesn't have a Floridian driver's license. I'm just sort of curious about whether that's really the case or not. But the stated goal is kind of weird too, as opposed to helping our neighbors in North Carolina who need it no matter what, versus, well, a lot of Floridians have second homes there, so maybe we'll help. What does the Orlando Sentinel have to say about this? First, it's sort of the pro forma stuff about how, bad the disaster is. And I don't mean to gloss over it, but, we have limited time here. Let's see. DeSantis said he's sending rescue teams to North Carolina where many Floridians have second homes. We're going to be bringing people to safety. We're going to have air missions, etc. DeSantis touted Florida's response back home and efforts to restore power and clear roads. Progress has been made, but roughly 3 days after the Tampa Bay region felt the historic punch of Helene as it charged up the Gulf Coast. Tens of thousands of residents there still had no electricity on Monday. Duke Energy, I'm sure no help there, reported their outages. The barrier islands of Pinellas County in particular experienced significant impact from historic storm surge. Yes. And what about going on in Asheville? Was there any, this is sort of a report of the damage there, but I don't know. And I guess nobody's stating explicitly that they are only offering assistance with Florida resources to Florida. It kind of makes a certain amount of sense, but it would be kind of a weird and early manifestation of this dystopian Project 2025 idea that states just take care of themselves and occasionally any state residents who might be caught out of state in this area, as opposed to saying, we have resources, we're not in as bad shape as North Carolina, we're going to lend you our resources. It's never that outright, but I don't know. And I think maybe they mean for that, since that's the usual MO, everyone is meant to assume that that's what they're doing, but it's phrased weirdly in a way that makes you believe that maybe they really are going to just help Floridians who have second homes there escape the damage and leave the locals to their own devices. I don't really know. But, it's not impossible, given that the number of Republican states that made a show of sending their guard troops to the Texas border, that was a very Republican play. They can't, I guess the damage is widespread enough in North Carolina, and it's rural North Carolina, such that everybody knows that there'll be some MAGA victims of the disaster. But the governor of the state is a Democrat. How does someone like Ron DeSantis navigate that? You send help to Tennessee, where there's a Republican governor, and you send help to North Carolina, but with the caveat that we're only going to be helping Floridians there. I don't know. We'll watch and see how that develops and whether that story pans out or not. All right, other things I wanted to share with you that are waiting in the wings to take a look at. Gosh, there's a lot. Some of which is more local than others. And let's see. Where did I want to go with on this one? All right, let's see. Maybe now we double back and take a look at some of those pieces about the depths, really, of Donald Trump's depravity. But you know what? Let me throw this one in the mix. This I wasn't expecting to get to, but maybe today's a good day for it, and then we'll do some roundups of some of these other stories, both on Friday when we have the solo show, and maybe we can pre-record some of this for Thursday. Time magazine, again, rare that I go that direction, but occasionally, lately, they've been surprising me with a couple of in-depth pieces. Iran, Trump, and the third assassination plot. We made some mention of this when we read something that Marcy Wheeler put together on the subject. Maybe a broader background on it would be wise at this juncture when Iranian meddling in at least two important to us regions of the world, here and the Middle East, happening at the same time. But this is the Asif Merchant story. I don't know whether it's merchant or merchant. Carl Vick reporting this for Time magazine. Asif Merchant was arrested on July 12th. He had just loaded his luggage onto his ride to the airport, commencing a journey either to his wife and children in Iran or to a different wife and children in his native Pakistan. In weeks of secretly recorded conversations with a federal informant, Merchant had confided that he had families in both countries. He also, and probably more importantly here, according to an FBI affidavit, had said he had come to America to arrange the assassination of a political person. The identity of that person was not explicitly stated, either by Merchant or his handler in Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, according to a leaked document that was posted online by Senator Charles Grassley on September 5th, after the Iowa Republican said it was provided to him by a whistleblower. But along with other evidence, the documents all but confirmed that Donald Trump was the person Merchant was authorized to offer up to $1 million to kill. And remember, this came up in the context of the weirdly organized manner in which someone who otherwise looks like a lone wolf crazy person, Ryan Ruth, was it, who was the one arrested sticking the rifle through the fence line down in Florida most recently. In the leaked document, Merchant described remotely scouting a Trump rally, then sending a written report on event security, how many guards, how many body scanners, back to Tehran. In secretly recorded meetings described by the FBI after his arrest, Merchant games out the assassination with the informant. The plan, he details, involved a crowd, a staged demonstration intended to serve as a distraction, a target at a podium, and security all around. Alerted to the Iranian plot well before Merchant's arrest, the Secret Service increased protection of Trump, context that only amplified the agency's failure when the assassin's bullet grazed the former president, would-be assassin's bullet anyway, grazed the former president at a campaign rally in Butler, Pennsylvania on July 13th. Remember, we were told at the time that the Secret Service had alerted local authorities that there was this Iranian threat in the air. Whether it had anything to do with the guy who actually took a shot, so far no connection. Federal authorities say they have found no evidence that the slain shooter, Thomas Matthew Crooks, acted with the assistance of anyone else, let alone Iran. There just happens to be, for some reason, lots of people around the world who want Trump dead. Nor has any evidence emerged connecting Iran to Ryan Wesley Ruth, who was apprehended after the attempted ambush of Trump earlier this month on a golf course in Florida, though Ruth displayed sympathetic interest in Iran. In a self-published 2023 book about Ukraine, he mentions Iran dozens of times and states that he repeatedly attempted to obtain a visa to join my Iranian friends in Iran, oh my, and protest U.S. sanctions on its government. In a passage expressing regret for voting for Trump, Ruth addresses Tehran directly. You are free to assassinate Trump, as well as me, for that error in judgment in the dismantling of the nuclear deal. No one here in the U.S. seems to have the balls, he says, to put natural selection to work, or even unnatural selection. Oh my. Well, that does nothing to dispel the nut part of lone nut. Anyway, prosecutors made note of the passage in a September 23rd court filing in which they also singled out a reference to Iran in a Dear World letter that Ruth had left behind, explaining his reasons for trying to kill Trump. The handwritten letter above goes on to state in part, he, the former president that is, ended relations with Iran like a child, and now the Middle East has unraveled. Every aspect of Ruth's peculiar life is under scrutiny, from the vainglorious social media postings to his quixotic trip to Ukraine, where he wanted to bring Afghan anti-Taliban fighters who had been living as refugees in Iran. And, in case you don't remember why something like that might happen. I think that probably has to do with Sunni Shia tensions the world over. Actually, I'm not 100% positive. Are Taliban loyalists Sunni or supported by Sunnis? I mean, that may be the case given that Osama bin Laden, very much Sunni, was behind the Mujahideen resistance to the Soviet invasion, and then later on resistance to everybody, including American invasion. And maybe that's why I guess Taliban would be Sunni oriented as opposed to possibly Shia. Being, in the Central Asian area might have been subject to Iran's sphere of influence, perhaps. So anti-Taliban fighters could be, in fact, could be Shia, or at least anti-Sunni in that they are anti-Taliban and might find refuge in Iran. It's an interesting wrinkle and everything. Merchant's arrest, by contrast, has drawn relatively little attention. Of the 3 assassination plots exposed in as many months, it is the only one detected in advance and described, well, if you don't find, the rifle sticking through the fence line but not yet firing enough in advance. And you prefer more advance notice than that, don't you? And this also described in detail by a U.S. government already acutely aware of the threat. Iran's leaders have been vowing to kill Trump for years, and they always say that, I'm sure, any U.S. president, since he ordered the January 2020 death of General Qasem Soleimani in particular. The documents released after Merchant's arrest tell a story of how serious that vow has proved to be. To the U.S., Soleimani was an enemy, the chief of Iranian operations outside Iran, a portfolio that takes in Hamas, Hezbollah, Syria, and the Houthis. And, I think that's a fair description. Enemy. Yeah. Problem, certainly. By sending particularly lethal IEDs into Iraq, he was responsible for the deaths of hundreds of Americans. But inside Iran, Soleimani was the most popular figure in an unpopular regime, described as James Bond, Erwin Rommel, and Lady Gaga all rolled into one. How did Lady Gaga get in there? And like a son to Iran's supreme leader. After his assassination by a drone strike, the Islamic Republic singled out Trump and every U.S. official involved for, quote, justice. The threat was sincere. Iran maintains a state apparatus expressly dedicated to assassinating perceived enemies overseas. We've learned about that recently. For most of the last 45 years, it was used chiefly to kill Iranian dissidents who reside abroad. After Soleimani's death, however, Tehran directed its assassins to murder some of the most prominent political figures in America. A remarkable shift that carries the potential to throw U.S. politics into crisis. Merchant, according to the leaked document, understood that the killing was related to Iran's retaliation for the death of Qasem Soleimani. Little is known of Merchant's life beyond his Pakistani nationality, and that he traveled frequently from Pakistan to Iran. After the news of his arrest, an Indian news site wrote that he had grown up in a wealthy Karachi family and controlled a $70 million portfolio. But according to the leaked document, a proffer or summary of information a suspect offers while negotiating for leniency, he told the FBI that he got involved with the IRGC for the money. Well, lots of rich people get involved with things for the money, actually. It's not terribly surprising. Donald Trump? Anybody? This April, he flew to Texas, where he appears to have family, again. Then on June 3rd to New York, where he was met at LaGuardia Airport by the person who would turn out to be the informant. In a Long Island hotel, according to the publicly filed arrest affidavit, Merchant announced that their partnership would not be in clothing imports, but assassination, which he illustrated by making a finger gun. That's kind of funny. I'm also kind of intrigued by, you want to get together on a business? Sure. What's the business? Clothing imports. All right. Changed my mind. Assassination. Well, golly. But of course, this informant must have known that in order to have been there and to be an informant. He allegedly instructed the informant to introduce him to assassins for hire. Got any? Wow. Anticipating that they would ask who they were expected to kill, that's an important part of the deal, Merchant had already put that question to his IRGC handler, identified in the leaked document as Mehrdad Youssef, when they spoke in a safe house in Iran in January. Merchant told the FBI that Youssef first replied that Merchant should tell the hired guns that the target was Trump, then paused and rattled off a range of other possible targets, Joe Biden or Nikki Haley or politicians, military people, or bureaucrats. Merchant interpreted Youssef's pause to mean Trump could be the target. He didn't use the pause to say, no, change my mind. Right? Just added other names. The plans appear to point nowhere else. It was after the conversation with Youssef that Merchant traveled to the U.S., researched the Trump campaign rally, then secreted his report, 30 guards, 4 to 5 scanners, in a package mailed to the handler. By the time he reached New York, the plan had grown elaborate. The FBI affidavit includes a photograph described as Merchant in the hotel room explaining the plan to the informant, referred to as a confidential source, or CS. It comes up later, CS. Time-stamped 7:34 p.m. on June 4th, the screen grab shows a slender, mustachioed man leaning intently forward, brow furrowed, and the left shirt sleeve pulled above the elbow to reveal a forearm tattoo. Merchant began explaining potential assassination scenarios on a napkin. All the important stuff is done on napkins. And quizzed the CS on how he would kill the target in the various scenarios. The affidavit states, Merchant pointed to the target and repeatedly asked the CS to explain how the target would die. Merchant told the CS that there would be security all around the person. Lots of people, fantasize about such things. Here's one of those pictures displaying that forearm tattoo. This allegedly shows Merchant gaming out the assassination plot on a napkin atop a hotel desk. Why people consider napkins to be so appropriate for this, I'll never know. He explains that the assassination will require a distraction, a noisy demonstration, he says, arranged in advance. Merchant also wants someone, he specifies a woman, to do reconnaissance. That would bring the number of people that he would need to keep the plot secret to nearly 30, including the actual assassins, whom Merchant reminds the informant he needs to line up. By the way, I'm thinking of assassinating Trump. You know anybody who could, do that for me? Never do your own work, I guess. At this point, the scale of the plot had surpassed any previously known Iran assassination mission, while retaining a signature seat-of-the-pants quality. The next day, Merchant will suggest he and the informant drive around Brooklyn to scout clubs where they might find willing accomplices. It's only in fun locations can we find accomplices. It's funny, but at the same time, the clumsiness doesn't mean that they're not determined to get rid of their opponents or to get rid of American officials, says Masih Alinejad, a Iranian dissident that Tehran has targeted repeatedly. In 2021, federal prosecutors charged Iranian agents with plotting to kidnap her from her home, then carry her by speedboat to Venezuela for transfer to Iran, and either imprisonment or death. A year later, a thug allegedly waited outside the same Brooklyn house in his car with an assault rifle and 66 rounds of ammunition. Oh, perfectly legal, though, here in the United States. The word of a specific Iranian threat to Trump leaked to news reports amid the intense scrutiny of the Secret Service's performance in the Butler shooting. By then, Merchant had already been arrested, but the details remained secret because on July 14th, a U.S. magistrate in Brooklyn had sealed the arrest affidavit at the request of prosecutors seeking time for investigators to pursue leads. 3 days later, Merchant sat down with prosecutors and FBI agents. The information he provided was compiled in a 5-page file labeled as a proffer, the document that would soon be leaked. Law enforcement regards this kind of document as confidential. Several days after Grassley posted it online, it was taken down at the request of the Justice Department, according to Grassley's staff, who added that negotiations were underway for more information. The Department of Justice told Time that it had no comment, but in previous reports did not dispute the authenticity of the document while protesting its being made public. Merchant's attorney, Avraham Moskowitz, expressed incredulity as to what he was doing there, I think. What proffer? Mr. Marchant is not cooperating, Moskowitz wrote Time by email after the document was posted. 3 weeks earlier, the attorney emphasized that Marchant enjoys the presumption of innocence. My client looks forward to his day in court and to the due process that our Constitution guarantees him. Unless we get rid of the Constitution, of course. The leaked document all but affirms the implication of the FBI affidavit filed when Marchant was arrested and finally unsealed on August 5th, that the logical target was Trump. I think that's the assumption, says Matthew Levitt, a former Treasury Department official who tracks Iranian assassination programs at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy, adding, you don't put everything in an indictment. Now some background, and still a long article. We're only about halfway through it, but we are, of course, very nearly out of time, but we'll see what they have for us on background. Since 1979, when the clerical regime came to power, Iran's agents have killed more than 440 Iranians outside its borders. By the count of the Abdurrahman Buraman Center for Human Rights in Iran, named for the democratic activist stabbed to death in the lobby of his Paris apartment by agents of the Islamic Republic in 1991. The count does not include non-fatal attacks like the March wounding by knife of a journalist for a dissident satellite television channel outside of his London apartment. We read about that last week. I've moved to almost 20 safe houses in 3 years, says Ahmadinejad, the dissident. She declined an offer to enter the federal witness protection program, she says, because doing so would prevent her from criticizing the Islamic Republic, where her social media profile, 8.5 million Instagram followers, drives her activism. And for the Iranian regime, the goal is silence. So she didn't want to give them that win. Like I said, plenty more in this Time Magazine article. I'm going to have to read it just so that we know what we can enter into the record on background, but something to keep an eye on as the election grinds on and the Middle East boils over and all of these loose ends, I don't know. Well, the world continues to fray around the same edge, I guess we'll say. And all that. All right, time now for us to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And let's see if we can't preview a little bit of what he's got on tap for you today in the remaining seconds. Disaster relief, as you know, used to be a nonpartisan issue that no one ever lied about until Donald Trump. Also on the rest of the menu, the Kentucky sheriff. We didn't get to this story yet. I'm glad he's going to bring this up. Who murdered a state judge in cold blood, has made the difficult decision to retire. We really do need to dig into that story. And the CEO of Steward Healthcare filed a lawsuit against a U.S. Senate panel over a contempt resolution that he got for ignoring a lawful subpoena. Everybody's suing now.
NetworksRadio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Yeah, down in Georgia, a trial is underway today challenging new rules passed at the last minute by the MAGA Georgia State Election Board to withhold or delay certification of November's election results. And I hope that it's the case that Brad Raffensperger, Brian Kemp, and others are actually going to be stand-up Republicans and are driving this case. Stay tuned for that and more next.